welcome back to episode 4 of Arsenal Pass, Time on the Round. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined by has-been, washed up, Hayden Dale. Hayden, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks, man. Yeah, washed up has
Great
been.
to have you. Yep, always super excited to be joined with you on these beautiful Friday afternoons. But Hayden, I want to talk about, you've been playing some Blitz recently, and just some Arbor events to say that, but they've changed a little bit. You know, you're in lockdown, you're playing online. I heard you picked up the Kano. How's that been?
I picked up the Kano. Yeah, it's played a few Arbor events this week, being, as you said, being in lockdown, being in the house, so had a bit extra time to play some events. It's been good. Played some Kano, picked it back up after a very long time having not played Kano. Skirmish Season 1 was the last time I played Kano at the very beginning. So yeah, just picked it up, been playing a few events. It's been super fun, actually. Brendan, you've converted me back to the Wizard train. I think after we did our deck tech with you, we did the deep dive on Wizard. I just had to get back and play some Kano. So yeah, been a good week of some Armory Blitz events. Didn't win any of them, to be honest. It was definitely losing games to myself a lot, just getting back into the hero. But yeah, it was fun. What about you? What's last few days? Been playing some games?
Yeah, I've been playing some games. Unfortunately, they've been class constructed, and that's not a dig at the format. It's just a time thing. So on these online ones, they can take really, really long. So over an hour per round. So I think actually this week was like all classic constructed for me, which is weird because I never thought I would say that, be eager to get back to Blitz, but I do feel quite eager to get back to those games that are a bit quicker. And also play Kano, where I can just finish my game in 5 minutes and go back to doing whatever I was doing, which is weird. I mean, it's probably it's not a mindset you should have for Flesh and Blood, but I play a lot of Armory, so obviously that's kind of where I end up. But yeah, pretty good.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say class constructed can be a bit. There's one thing I found with the last few weeks just being from home and trying to play some events and get some games in. Is like class constructed is a tough format for online. It's like you say, it goes longer. There's a bit more sort of communication needed between players to see certain zones. There's a lot more like checks of graveyard or things you need to have a look at, and there's just things that don't work as well. So I'm glad that the world is getting back to brick and mortar events with Road to Nationals, and that being class constructed, because I think a class constructed season, like a skirmish season where there's a lot of online events, would be tough to say the least.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
I mean, this is actually kind of funny too, because most of the Armory events I play are European ones, so I play in the afternoon, like because it's like late afternoon for me.
Just tea time
like
for
I'm
you,
usually,
right? That's dinner
yeah,
time
yeah.
for
I've
you.
usually winded, I've kind of winded down on being productive for like the early morning, and then I don't know. I kind of stop. I don't play too much at night, so I don't really play the US ones because I just get tired. I'm old, man. I'm a boomer, so I just want to go to sleep, pass out. But yeah, I mean, there was something literally on the tip of my. Oh, last week we played Gauntlet. So last week was Gauntlet week 15, I think, and it was the first week that both Dante and I played. So we didn't stream the event. I was feeling pretty ill, and the result was pretty funny. So Dante and I both went undefeated in the Swiss. Hayden here, and Davis Kingsley's tower number 9 also made top 8, and then top 4 was Dante, me, Hayden, and Tower. And then I punted and lost to Dante in the finals, which is great. But it was just funny how that ended up. Wonder if any of those potatoes in Gauntlet thought that me and Dante were washed up and we couldn't play. But just kidding. But it was fun to finally play our event.
Throwing the gauntlet down, as Brendan would say, he comes in and 1-2 for the casting team. So it's gonna have to be stepped up next week, I think. And look, to be fair, it was only 1-2 because you got a bit of charity from me in the semi-finals, right? Me and Brendan did well. We got paired in the semi-finals, but unfortunately, I had to race to a meeting, so had to.
Yeah, charity, right?
Yeah, I'm a nice guy.
1-0.
Yeah, 1-0. Yeah, Brendan's gonna claim that one.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I might play next week too. Just depends how much direct message backlash I get for not streaming the event. But yeah, definitely keen to kind of. I don't know. I feel like everybody's been spoiled being able to play these events while we've been casting them. I mean, casting them is a great opportunity and experience, but yeah, like an 8 round like larger tournament is a pretty awesome thing to be a part of. So I really enjoy playing them. So kind of eager to keep doing that. But anyway, yeah, me and Hayden, we wanted to kind of start off today talking about formats. I know I have one that I'm particularly keen about. that was first showcased in the Red Riot tournament. So Red Riot kind of did like, it was kind of a half tournament because we actually never played the finals. But I love the idea, and the execution was actually pretty good as well. It was a 5v5, and it was region based. So it was like USA versus UK, Canada versus Singapore. And the way it worked is that you had 5 players on a team. Deck lists were locked a couple days before, and then the order was locked as well. So it's really interesting because there's like a strategic way you would do that, especially if we're thinking pre-Monarch format where there was a lot of Ira and a lot of Dorinthia. You could do things, it being strategic, if you knew that, like, let's say I was playing Canada. Canada has a player with a very large ego on their team who's probably going to go first, named Dante Delfico. I can just shoot somebody on an OTK Viscera and just give Dante an auto loss in the first round. The way it actually turns out is that Dante's super lazy, so he went last. But there's like all this really interesting thinking that goes around there because you got to think where are they going to put their Iras, where are they going to put their Kanos, because you can bring an OTK Viscera, it can auto win against Ira, but it'll auto lose versus Kano. Like 100% Kano should never lose that matchup. But anyway, like I said, it was kind of a half tournament. We played the UK and the US team, and we beat them. And then Canada lost to Singapore, and we never actually got to play the finals. So like my kind of pitch for this is like I want it to be 3v3, open teams. So you assemble you and 2 other friends, and it'd be like 3v3, and then we can kind of keep going. But yeah, the most important thing for me is you lock the deck list, and you also lock the order before each opponent match. So if you think about a team as being like a single entity or unit, like you would lock before that team. So if you didn't know like certain players, you could be like, okay, I really think they're going to put this player first because he's their best player. Then you could sort of switch it around. And I know that the original organizer of it was talking about doing this tournament in the future and said, we should make it so everybody's play different heroes. I think I'm for that. I'm not too sure. Like, I'd be interested to know what other people think. Like, I think it's cool to have different heroes, cool to have diversity. I do think that it does take away from some of the strategic decisions that you can make with picking and counter picking and things like that. Because like, let's pull back to the 5v5 with the regions. Like, if we looked at the UK, we knew that like it was going to be a primarily like Dorinthia based team. We looked at Canada, it was like a very Ira based team. And that made it really interesting for like what we planned on picking. So yeah, I mean, that's a format I would love to see. I know that like pretty much everyone is keen on playing that again or playing some sort of derivative for it. And I think 3v3 would be a pretty good entry. And it could be really fun. I think it could be a super successful format.
Yeah, I mean, I really like teams formats. Some of the best events that I've been to have been team events in TCGs. One of my favorite sort of team formats that I think would be, you talk about 3v3, and one of the best 3v3 formats I think there has been is like unified constructed. So we saw this a lot in Magic, especially in the later years of like GPs into Magic Fest, as they would have unified constructed events where you have a format, so say like classic constructed, and then like on your team you can have only one, so you can only have the unique card in one person's deck. So you have 3 different heroes because you can't have more than one hero at that point because of the one unique card rule. Then you have, say you have E-Strikes. Well, they can only be in one deck. You can't split them across the decks like 2-1 or 1-1-1. You just, like, if you play any copies, you can only play them in one deck. You want to play some copies of Erran's Prayer. You can't split them. You have to play like 1, 2, 3 in one deck. So that's a format I really like. I think it becomes really strategic about where you put certain people in which seats, so like which heroes, the configuration of heroes you play, so that you get access to probably the best spread of like the generics that you want. So I guess having 2 heroes that rely on like the same pool of generics can be really tough. Like if you've got, I don't know, Ninja and Ranger, for instance, and they both want to have like Razor Reflex and whatever cards, then that can be more difficult. Or you have like 2 defensive decks that want to utilize Unmovable, like that's going to be really tough. So I think it's I think teams formats are cool. We played teams at the Battle Hardened before the Auckland calling. That's just recently been. That was a sealed. That was team sealed. So you got, I think it was 12 packs. It was quite a lot of packs actually. Actually, no, it wasn't. It was 9 packs. It was, okay, I think it was 9 packs. I don't know. Honestly, I can't remember. It was a long time ago. But you build like 3 sealed decks. Ago. Yeah, it was 2 months ago. But so much has happened since then. So much has happened, Brendan. We got Monarch. We got Constructed. yeah, and then you build 3 decks, and you each get sideboards as well. So you can't be like, oh, I'm about to play this hero. Like, give me the, I don't know, Null equipment if it was Arcane Rising. It's like, no, you have to assign those to each player. So I really like those kind of teams. Yeah, it's really
unique Null Rune.
Or Spell Void in Monarch.
Yeah.
So it's I think it's a really interesting way to do it. I'd love to see something come out of teams in the future. I don't know what that kind of. I imagine they probably will do something. I know, like, someone like James White, who's very competitive minded as well, would want to see something a bit more team based. Very likely. I know in the past, someone like Jason, who's one of the developers, who has played on teams for Magic and team events. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get something. It's probably just maybe not quite the right time for a year, but whether that looks like something like you've said with that kind of when it stays on kind of format where you go to your last player runs out basically, or you just go 3v3. It's first to best 2 out of 3 basically of those. I don't mind either, to be honest. I probably prefer the unified approach, but because what I quite like is you have the 3 players on each side, right? And you're playing simultaneously, so you can actually have conversations with each other. So if I was playing against Brendan and I had my teammate on the left and he was playing against someone else, we could have a conversation about their game, what's happening there, what their opponent's doing, and then they could chip in on mine. And one of my favorite things is being like, having a quad red hand and being like, oh, I mean, I could just pitch this and then like come in for 10 and like just have no damage in my hand whatsoever, but my opponent doesn't need to know that. So you gotta sell the dream sometimes. Yeah.
I'm happy that you said winner stays on, because I realized that I explained the format that I was talking about, but I didn't explain how it was played. So it is like a ABC, or in our case with the 5 A B C D E. Winner stays on. So A's play. When one loses, the A plays the B. So and so until you go all the way through the 5, and then whoever defeats the other opponent's players first wins.
So in theory, you could have just one player just run the gauntlet, right, and just take out the whole opposing team by themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that's the thing, is it makes it interesting too, in terms of like team psychology and roles, because playing last, like you said, can be the most important role, but it can also be a role where you don't play many matches because your opponent, your teammate's just really good and they go through. I know that when we played, I think, only one player on our team didn't play, so we actually had a close match, but it was very viable that player 1 could have just rolled through the whole team. Which I don't think necessarily leads to a bad experience, because it is about the team aspect in my mind. Like, it's less about trying to win for your individual glory, but it's even if I hadn't played, I think I was 3rd. I would have been very happy just to win.
Yeah, I do think that there could be some issues with that kind of, where people don't get to play the amount of games they might like to play, and they've signed up for this event and then they get to play like. That's the one thing I do like about the 3v3 format, whether it be unified or non-unified, is that everyone's playing. You can have these engaging conversations. There's some really like fun moments where like you aren't seeing a line, but your teammates like helps you find the line. It can be really rewarding. You can have someone who's a bit more of like a coaching role maybe in the middle to help the team as well. So I think I've always quite enjoyed that format. I'm not sure what other people think. Anyone's played those kind of formats? Let us know what you think.
Yeah, there was another idea someone was telling me, which it's extremely high barrier to entry, but for those of us who play quite a bit, I think it could be really fun. Probably Blitz only, surely Blitz only, but more of like a Hearthstone-esque format where you bring 3 heroes and then you go through that. Still kind of the same setup as before, but it's 1 player. It would just be interesting to kind of force people to not play, just Ira or just Dorinthia, and expand their hero pool. Obviously, like, the financial constriction of that is a lot, so I can never see it being official, but as sort of like a community kind of for fun thing, you'd probably allow proxies and something like that. It could be really cool.
Yeah, there's actually, so me and Brendan have been talking about kind of fun formats. We've got Constructed, Classic Constructed, Blitz, and Limited, and we play a lot of these formats. We put out some gameplay stuff out there. We were also talking about do we try and do something a bit more fun, a bit more engaging and casual, where maybe we run an event that's along the lines of this sort of thing. Maybe it's not teams though, but maybe it is that kind of format where you bring 3 decks. Maybe it's a throwback format. We're thinking maybe a Welcome to Wraith only constructor format. A lot of people didn't get to experience that format. I know there's been a lot of conversation in the community about going back and playing an event with just Welcome to Wraith and what that would look like now that people have all this knowledge that they've gained from the game. Because we talked about the other week, decks back then were pretty rudimentary. People were still learning the fundamentals of the game. So love to get people's, ideas and feedback. Like this is something that we're seriously thinking about, putting on an event to get people, the chance to play some of these formats that they might never have played or want to experience. So let us know what you think. Drop us a comment as well, and we might be organizing something in the very near future, Brendan.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the decks obviously sucked back then. You can go look at the deck list; they're terrible. But more than that, because Dorinthia a bit easier to build, right? So that was slightly more streamlined, what you'd expect. But the players were really bad. Like everyone was really bad. One of my best friends won that calling, and he was really bad back then. So it'd be interesting to see how those decks kind of work when players have 1 almost 2 years of experience under their belt. Because it's really the fundamentals. Like people have a much better grasp on the fundamentals. Where back then, it was a lot easier to win very consistently because a lot of people would just make plays that were sort of objectively incorrect, right? Where that's not really the case anymore.
Yeah.
Which I think both me and you have noticed with the significant drops in our win rates since Welcome to Wraith, because that was an interesting one. But yeah, it would just be interesting to see how the old decks and old archetypes grow into a format where people are better at the game, better at deck building, and just also have the hindsight knowledge of knowing what was the best deck back then.
Yeah, this is definitely something we can organize and we can facilitate and do. We just want to know what people actually would like to play and what they would love to see. So would it be a throwback format like that? Would it be something like Brendan suggested with a more Hearthstone kind of format? Just give us some ideas. Let us know what we want to play. We will get something going. We can do that. We have the ability to do it. So, all right, Brendan.
Oh, I was trying so hard to not say this, but I feel like Hayden Dale is doing everything he can not to play Classic Constructor at this point.
No, I still enjoy playing Classic. I'm enjoying finding new things in this format and trying new things. But also, I think there's Road to National season is actually a long season, and it rolls into
it's a grind, man.
Yeah,
it's a grind.
It rolls into what's happening with the final Monarch calling before we get to the new set, so in Vegas. And although that's only a couple of months away, there's a lot happening in between there, and something that's a bit more maybe lighthearted and fun, especially if people are, they might be playing 2-3 Road to Nationals, going to one of the callings. Then there's a lot of downtime in between what's happening over the next sort of months and weeks. So yeah, just trying to keep it a bit light and not always this very serious Classic Constructor grind, because it can get a bit tiresome and a bit wearing.
We have a long time. We have a lot of events too coming up, so Classic is going to be. If you're serious about the game, Classic is going to be your life for the next few months. But the last format I want to talk about is one that's already been created, but they announced that it's going to be an official side event at the calling in Vegas, which is not surprising, but that's Ultimate Pit Fight. I have I have played a couple games of Ultimate Pit Fight, but that was online and it was with a couple friends. Other than that, I haven't played it. Obviously, we know in games like Magic that Commander is by far the most popular format. They have a much more kind of diverse card pool, so creativity can shine a lot more. I feel like in that game at this point. But Ultimate Pit Fight is something that could be very fun at a casual level. Obviously, there's heroes like Shiana and all this stuff that are just get crazy in those kind of formats. So. Yeah, have you had a chance to play that at all?
UPF.
Yeah,
I played one UPF. Yeah. I played a four-person pod of a UPF. Yeah.
How was it?
It's okay. It's I think it's a good if you like multiplayer, then I think it's a good multiplayer format. They've done it well. Personally, I don't like multiplayer person versus person versus person formats and TCGs or anything really.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's cards like Gargantuan Tome and Cooks of Commotion, which get really funky in settings like that, especially the Gargantuan Tome, because I think it's a staple in UPF. Anyway, let's head on to kind of the second thing we have on this list. Last week we did the top 3 underrated cards. So this week we're going to do the top 3 overrated cards. Hayden, I'm going to let you start.
Yeah, so I mean, we just had a chat before we started recording. We kind of liked what we did last week with those top 3 cards, and we think it's something that's is kind of interesting as well because the card pool is starting to grow, and we're seeing the game develop over time. And there's cards that still haven't seen play, and on the flip side of that, there's cards that are still seeing a lot of play that maybe we think are being a bit overplayed or they've had their day in the sun. So, Brendan, rather than 3 each, I think we've got 5 here that we're just going to run through and give our views on, why we think people might want to start to stray away from these cards a little bit or don't need to be playing as much as maybe they're being played right now. Let's start with...
and go ahead.
Yeah, we get into it?
I was gonna say, like, a lot of these cards are really, really good. Like they are good. So we're not saying these cards are bad because they're obviously not. They're popular cards. They're good and they're good for a reason. But they are definitely like back to that original word, like overrated. Played a bit too much value put on them. And see them in a lot of decks where they probably shouldn't be.
Yeah, overplayed, overrated. I think this is it. And in no way any of these cards bad. I think, in fact, all these cards are good. All right, Endel Spring Tunic. Brendan, want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, maybe overplayed and overrated, but particularly in Blitz, overplayed. Definitely overrated. So I'm really surprised at one of the big kind of mental changes we've had as a community in Flesh and Blood, which is we don't see people really complaining about financial barriers to entry to play the game. It still obviously exists, but in back in Welcome to Wraith, oh my goodness, that was like one of the most annoying things I had to deal with was people complaining about, not being able to play like, their Friday night fab, whatever you want to call it, because they didn't have a Tunic, which is ridiculous because Tunic is not that good. Obviously, if you are in a format like Welcome to Wraith or in this like kind of these longer games of Class Constructed, yeah, you're going to get good value out of it and it's a good card. But in Blitz, I mean, it's good. And like Ira, who draws out games, can defend really well, has great targets for it, like Flying Kick and Razor Reflex. It's definitely the one you want. But, I mean, the Heart and Cross Wrap is just a beast of an armor. It doesn't block for anything, but it's a reduction of 2 resources. So, over a game of Blitz, like, Heart and Cross Wrap can usually get you more resources than the Tunic.
Almost
always.
Yeah.
So that card is just fantastic. And I think the Tunic, especially in Blitz, is just massively overrated. I think you'd be pretty hard to see people who consistently get 2 resources out of that card in a single game. And the people who do are probably playing Ira and playing longer games.
Yeah. I think sometimes you're not even getting 1 resource out of it. So, games can end on turn 3 and you win second, So it's I think it's a very good card. Don't get me wrong, Tunic is a very good card. But I think the impact of it has gone down as we've had more chest options come into the game. I also think that the game is sped up, especially even in Class Constructed, but Blitz, of course, as you said, I think in Blitz, Tunic is often just very incorrect. A lot of decks I've played, you don't even want Tunic in your armor loadout because you never want to play it. I think in Reinhardt, for instance, Barkbone Strapping and Heart and Cross Strap or No Room Chest, whatever, I don't even want a part of Tunic. I think Vest of the First Fist is another really good option that people aren't playing. I know we're talking about Tunic specifically, but just in terms of alternates and from maybe a budget perspective. In Ira, for instance, I think Vest of the First Fist is perfectly reasonable in these more aggressive Ira decks. I think Vest probably had a place at the end of the first skirmish season as maybe the correct chess piece over Tunic in a lot of matchups. The problem is you just couldn't fit both in. So, but I said to people, if you're going to play one and you don't have the Tunic, just play the Vest. It's still really good. Come in for a big turn, your Snapdragon Scaler's turn, you get Flying Kick for free. It's pretty good.
It's not bad.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Tunic probably a bit overplayed. Realistically in Blitz, you're often probably averaging a resource and a defensive point, which is that really what you need?
Yeah, certain matchups, the defensive point is pretty important, but that's because we have a lot of damage thresholds like 7 and 4 in Blitz.
But we even saw, in the recent charity event, Class Constructed event, that Kieran McIntyre, who won the event, was playing Heart and Cross Strap in his deck. Yes, he had Tunic as well for the longer games, but for those more explosive sort of matchups that he was playing, he played Heart and Cross Strap because the format has sped up, and those 2 resources for his key turns on a Surging Strike or whatever it might be were just more important and more consistent for him to have, rather than waiting around for his first resource off Tunic when maybe he actually needed to use those 2 resources on turn 1 or turn 2 or or turn 7. Like, it doesn't, there's no consistent time that you're going to use Tunic every game, right?
Yeah, I wait for the day where I see a turn 0 Hardened Cross Trap. That will be the day I retire.
I've seen it in Limited. I've definitely seen that in Limited.
Oof.
It involved regurgitating Slogism though, so
Yeah, for real, it doesn't really surprise me, but that's crazy.
All right, we're gonna move on. Second card. We're sticking with the Welcome to Wraith format and flavor here. Razor Reflex, Brendan.
Yeah, I mean, this was the one that I put first on my list. Razor Reflex, it's a great card. But it's totally overplayed. Like, Razor Reflex really needs to be in your deck's kind of core competency, I think. The biggest offender I see nowadays is Shane decks playing that card. I mean, Christ, you're already at the casino. You don't have to, put everything on black 27. It's ridiculous. Like, getting a Razor Reflex is, I mean, it's bad to pitch. It's bad to block with. It's maybe not even the card you want in Arsenal. And it's good and only good in some scenarios on the combat chain. And yeah, it's just not the card. I don't think it's a card you want in your Shane list. And if you're playing Shane, increasing your variance by any amount, you're crazy. But yeah, I mean, definitely there. And then, I mean, I know in Welcome to Wraith it was quite popular, but obviously we had a more limited card pool back then, even in Arcane Rising and things like that. But I still think that it is criminally overplayed and is a bit more niche than, where it's currently viewed, which seems to be kind of like a catch-all, like slot in any aggro deck, something like this. I don't think it's that card.
No, because you need to look at it. So look at what Razor Reflex actually does. First of all, it defends for 2, so that's a cost. It costs 1, so you're paying 1 for 3, effectively 1 for 3 damage, which in a deck that's trying to be explosive with damage, that's not actually a great rate. Like, that's not where you want to be, especially with a low blue count or a low resource count, and just for 3 damage. What the upside you're getting, of course, is the go again if it's on an action card. But then, so a lot of decks that already have these ways to get go again, or a lot more efficient ways to get go again, are still playing this card, and it doesn't feel as strong. I think even to the extent where Ira, for a while, like we've said this before, Razor is not actually a fantastic card in Ira. It's just a necessity in a lot of the meta calls because of things like Kano, where you need to be able to put pressure on, or you need to slip around these certain small set of reactions that are being played. But in a lot of cases, like just shipping into a Ranger deck or just shipping into a Ninja deck that can't actually utilize it. I know, like, in the end of the Welcome to Wraith Arcane Rising format, there was some like online leagues going on, and Sasha Markovic was playing a Ninja deck that didn't play Razor, and I looked at it and thought, why is he not playing Razor? And I thought about it, I thought, well, why would he play Razor in this list? You don't need Razor in this list. You have the Art of Wars, your cards will have go again. You're paying 1 for 3 to try and sneak over a Mass Trigger, but Ancestral Empowerment already helps you do that. You've got Art of War. So yeah, I think the card has definitely probably been overplayed. I just feel like it's had its kind of time in the sun as cards get stronger.
I mean, Sasha hates Razor Reflex. He very begrudgingly put that in his deck for that constructed calling, and that was literally because we were only worried about timing out in Swiss, and people wouldn't play around it, which is crazy. But
it's flexible, right? It's a flexible card, but it's just like in terms of the fact that it can help you get go again. It can always be a 3 buff on your weapon, but it costs 1 and defends for 2, and it's a red. So it's just like,
Yeah, I think like its useful applications are a bit limited. In terms of coming in for raw damage, like it's a pretty expensive rate, blocking for 2, being red, and then costing 1. Because the 1 is just the brutal part. Like, I mean, it's great off Tunic, right? Mm-hmm. But a lot of things are great off Tunic, so it's like that's like a terrible argument.
Yeah. You can find other ways to tax your Tunic. You're never short of ways to use your Tunic, I think. All right, next card. And one I know Brendan's super excited to talk about, and that's Command and Conquer. Now, before we jump to it, I want to say again, we're not saying these cards are bad. We're not saying these cards aren't playable. We're not saying these cards you shouldn't play. But these cards definitely, in our eyes, overrated, overplayed. Command and Conquer, why?
Well, my favorite example of this is the, it was much better in this format, but I remember Arcane Rising Welcome to Wraith. Literally, it was in every deck. Like, every single deck played Command and Conquer Pummel, because that was like the new thing back then, and it was so good because Welcome to Wraith was a defense reaction format, and Command and Conquer is super good against that. So obviously now we're in this day and age. Command and Conquer is still such a good card because it's good against defense reactions, right? We know that. There's less defense reactions being played in Classic Constructed. That's a fact, but it ripping Arsenal and making the opponent block is what makes it so good. And it's still super relevant, and it's a very adaptable card in the sense that it's relevant against control or defense reactions, also relevant against aggro, who can't efficiently block because they got a lot of block twos and they want to keep their arsenal. That being said, people throw Command and Conquer in literally everything. I see Command and Conquer in a lot of decks where maybe it's not the best slot. Obviously, it's really good in Ira, but I mean, I'll see it in, I've seen it in Prism, Levia, pretty much literally everything. I mean, it used to be in Katsu for like a while. So yeah, I mean, Dorinthia, all this kind of stuff. It's a really good card. I mean, I think on this list, that's going to be the best card that we're going to say is a bit overrated. So I totally understand Command and Conquer's power. I play it in my Shane deck. So like, and that's a deck that shouldn't be playing it, right? Like it's a high variance card. It's also really expensive for that deck, but the effect is so powerful that I think it's important. But still, I do think that the card is overrated and is not just an auto slot into every single deck, which is what it's kind of treated as.
Yeah, and its impact in the format, like you say, is lessened as the, I guess, density of defense reactions has started to slide away a bit as people start to realize the power of like a format like Monarch, where there's a lot more proactive plans, a lot less mid-range or defensive plans.
Yep.
So on the flip side, you do force people to block, but people are building their decks to defend a lot better with 3 defense, things like that. So there's certainly times where it's still super viable, but I think one thing that people do as well with Command & Conquer is it's just like, it's an auto-include in decks and then it doesn't come out for any matchup. I think a lot of decks want to play it, but don't necessarily want to play it in every matchup because it just doesn't do a lot of things into certain matchups. Like you use some good examples where decks defend for 2, or you really can put pressure on their arsenal. Fantastic times. But when people are happily playing, like 3 or 4 card hands into you, a card like Command & Conquer, either they just buy the damage because they probably don't have an arsenal very often, or they throw 2 cards and they're perfectly happy to have traded that, 2 bad cards for your Command & Conquer and your action point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not the command. It's 2 cards for your turn, that's for a lot of people. Like that's what for a lot of decks, that's what Command & Conquer is. That's your turn, and that's a very easy turn to manage. Obviously, the pummels make that a bit harder, but yeah, I mean, trading 2 cards if you have a 4-card hand for the other player's entire turn.
Yeah.
In this format, that's cake. Right? 6 damage with an on trigger. Who cares? Like that's nothing.
Yeah, we don't have pummel on this list, but All right, Brendan, let's move on. We've got our first class-specific card here, and we've got Hit and Run. I'm going to start with this one. So, Hit and Run's an interesting one. When the format when Crucible first came out, Spoils of War was like the big. Everyone was talking about Spoils of War, like what this card did. The fact it just gave natural go again to Warrior. You don't have to work for it. It only costs 1, so it was better than Warrior's Valor. To many people, it was better than Driving Blade. It was the new option. And then people were talking about Hit and Run as well. So Hit and Run, a natural way to get go again. Your second attack, it gives you the buff. I think this card is fine. It's a reasonable card. And there's Dorinthia decks and Warrior decks in particular that can utilize this card really well. Kasai decks as well can obviously use this really well. Centauri Sabers. There's probably room for it with certain Axe builds now as well. Now we have Monarch. But where this has probably been overplayed and is definitely overrated is in decks, just Dorinthia decks in particular, which has been the prominent Warrior, just jamming this card in.
Mm-hmm.
It just, the card that says go again, basically, because they're never getting the buff off of it.
Yeah, or very rarely. Like I've seen a lot of Dorinthias, not so much anymore, because that deck is kind of gone away in Blitz a bit, at least in this region. But they play out the red Hit and Run to give the Dawnblade go again. That's so bad. But I've also gotten killed by a Dorinthia that played Glint Twinning on me and then hit the red Hit and Run off the top when they had Steel Blade Supremacy, Iron Tongue, and Termination. So that was fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's the blue one is good. It's also very versatile, but the other colors are played more than they should be. Where I think you need a pretty good reason to play red Hit and Run. If it's in your deck. You
need a deck for it. You need a deck built for it. So you need a deck that wants to actively go wide and set up these big, probably like 2, 3, 4 attack turns that's utilizing Twinning Blade or maybe like Dustpath Pilgrimage. These ways to give your weapon the ability to attack again, to break that once per turn. Otherwise, yeah, or utilizing potentially, a second attack. I know people are really hyped on like being able to hit and run into like a Command & Conquer, for instance, things like that, because it is just any attack. But yeah, the red is such a high cost, right? It's like you're just using 1 card to say go again, And there's a reason people struggle with playing like yellow and red Wyvern Skies. It's the same reason, and this is even more limited in some ways. So it does block for 3, I guess. But yeah, a red that doesn't pitch doesn't let you do things to set up late. I think the blue has place, but the red, when you're paying a card just to give go again, that's not really where you want to be. And we just talked about Razor Reflex, right? At least that's 3 damage and go again.
Yeah,
Cool.
Agree with you on that one.
All right, Brendan, we're going to go to our last card, and a bit of a cheat here from Brendan. Brendan slotted this one at the end, and I'm going to let Brendan start, and then I'm going to come with some counters, I think, potentially. But
yeah, I'm going to get crucified for this.
Brendan's put down Prism.
Yeah, so Prism. Some people. It probably depends on your local meta and what you face, but I know that Prism is, in my opinion, way overhyped around me. The Prism design is not my favorite right now, just because I feel like at least Luminaris, like the Luminaris builds are what I'm not a fan of. It feels very linear, extremely draw dependent, and very, very, very high variance. And I don't really see too many people playing like a Luminaris build that isn't constricted by those downsides. But yeah, I mean, I think like my kind of current views on the class come from maybe how hyped I was about the class. I was really excited for auras. I thought they would be really cool, and you could have these like control aura strategies, which you probably can. There probably is a deck that can do that. Whether that deck is viable in the current meta, I don't know, because the current meta feels a bit constraining for innovation. But we will see. But I do think that Prism is a bit overrated, because that is like, it depends on where you play, right? But that is like a hugely played classic constructed class in a lot of areas. Like people see that as like, oh well, how do you beat Shane? You just land an Arclight Sentinel on them when they have 5 shackles, and it's like, I don't know. It's like the age-old Azalea argument. It's like, what if I sleep dart him on his 7th shackle? It's like, what? What if yeah, I mean, there's tons of these theoreticals. Like, you can get that one card out of your deck that wins, right? Yeah, and that's just not going to be a consistent winning strategy.
You have to get there first.
Yeah.
And then you have to have it happen.
And then just like the Luminaris ones, they just come in like they're like, I mean, that deck just feels like it almost never wants to block too. It's just like, okay, throw out the big stuff, hope they don't break it. I have my Dreamweavers, and you can intelligently use the Dreamweavers, but it's like throwing out big one after big one, not really blocking on the way back, and just coming in for 15 every turn. Just personally not a fan at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I've been playing a bit of Prism, and it's something we've got a Prism versus Bravo gameplay that will go up. Actually, it'll be up before this video, so you'll be able to go and have a look at that. I think that's a good example of just a very classic Prism build right now. There's a few tech things in there, a few different things. I play Iris in that matchup, which is not something that people have been playing as much of, like you said, the Luminaris builds. I think there is space for Prism right now, and people love the class. And if you love the class and you want to play it, go ahead and play it. Like, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Like, if you're playing this game, you want to have fun because it's a game. So if Prism is the class you want to play 100%, I think people are looking to it as a solution for some things in the format right now that I just don't think are there. Like you say, with like Arclight Sentinel, with these big hitters like Heralds and Phantasmaclasm, you do have to just often go in and hope people don't have 6 attacks. But the card pool is limited right now. Like, this is the first Illusionist class we've had. Prism's card pool is limited to an extent. So I think we're going to see Prism or Illusionist become more of a thing down the track. Prism will get more cards as well. And then, like you said, maybe there's a format or a change in the meta where, because personally, I love the design of the auras. I think they're really cool. I love.
Oh yeah, I do too.
Ode to Wrath, Mystical Retribution.
Things sticking on the field. I love it. Like, I was all for it. I was all for it.
But that's not what Prism decks are right now, because it's really hard to be like. In some matchups, you can be like that, but against the predominant players in the format and the Katsus and the chains, you just need to be a big hitter deck, and it's I think it's probably
you can beat them. Like, you can beat them. That's the thing. But like, usually when you beat them, it's of no reason of what you did, right? Like, it's just you just drew the big old heralds and they came. There's a lot of damage. I mean, we're talking about Luminaris. I know you played Iris, but in the aggro matchups, I do think that like the sort of decision trees in that deck are quite linear.
Sure, and I don't think that means that it's that's the reason that we think it's overrated to an extent. Obviously, that's the reason that you don't like the class as much, you don't want to play it as much right now. But also the fact that you are so reliant on these few cards and the weapon, and you can't really change up your game plan. You basically have that, and you have your auras plan, and it's really difficult to midway through games change up your game plan depending on how you've sideboarded. These cards, auras don't defend. Your cards with Phantasm don't. They attack and they block. So there's only certain things you can do with the class. I really hope we get more from Illusionist in the future, because I actually, as I said, the auras I think are super interesting and super awesome. But yeah, Prism's space right now I feel like is a little bit more limited. Well, it's seeing play a lot, which makes sense. It's a new class, right? It's a new hero. It's a new class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the class is particularly weak right now or anything like that. It's just that its game plan seems to be not dynamic, so it can't really switch up and adapt to its opponent, and it seems a bit linear in the sense that it crumbles under pressure, but also pushes out crumbling pressure. This is mostly the Luminaris go again, but we did need one on this list that was controversial, and we can't say Azalea because then we would lose every subscriber because everybody is no, I'm kidding.
I'd be quitting.
But I don't know. Azalea's an interesting class right now.
Well, it's not. I don't think it's overrated or overplayed.
Yeah, no, it's played a lot. I think it's like dude. If I had to pull some data out of my backside, I would say that Azalea is probably one of the most pet decked class in Classic Constructed. I don't know. I don't know. There's no other class where I know so many people that only play that class, and they're just like devoted to making that successful. Everybody's playing like Shane and all that stuff. They just want to play the best deck and they want to win. Like, no, I've never met a person who was like, I love Shane. I love his design. I love banishing off the top.
I think there's a few people like that out there, but
I know I'll meet them eventually. But I have met so many people, and especially in my locals, especially online, so many people like, I got my new Azalea brew, and it's like, it's going to sleep dart you. And I'm like, oh man, can't wait to see this one. But it's actually doing well right now because that deck does have relevant on-hit triggers for Shane. Yes, exactly. Just like, see how it does in Nikatsu.
All right, well, that's our list of, I guess, 5 overrated, overplayed cards right now, with a little caveat at the end there. And again, these are all very good cards. Prism is a good class. If you want to play it, 100% do. I know it's a lot of people's favorite, and for good reason. But it is seeing a lot of play. And I wanted to end off because we just talked about design there, Brendan. Do you have a class in Flesh and Blood so far that you just absolutely love the design of? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Wizard. It's not even close. Yeah. Like, it's not even close. Like, asymmetric gameplay is like, I don't know, it's so much more fun. Like, you just don't play. Yeah. I mean, it's miserable for your opponent. Don't get me wrong. Like, it sucks to play against. I hate playing against Kano. But right now, I mean, it's the most. I mean, it seems like it's the most complicated, right? I find it to be by far the most rewarding, and I think it's really the only class in Flesh and Blood that you'll consistently find people that are just like, they're never gonna learn it. They're never gonna play it. They don't care. They don't want to care. They don't know. Like, they don't want to know anything about it. They just think that is a lucky high, and it's the opposite. It's the total. I mean, you can play it for luck, but you're gonna lose way more than the people who don't. And it's the total opposite. It's like the definition of dynamic, adapting to your opponent's game plan, playing to your outs. It's by far my favorite deck, by far. I mean, and design, which was your original question. What about you?
Yeah, I just was more curious about design space. I mean, so mine is Brute. I think the Brute as a class has my favorite design space, and it's actually, it's not close. I think Runeblade is somewhere in there, but more so for the Viscerai side.
Viscerai, right?
Yeah, I really liked Viscerai when it came out. But Brute, I love the design of the fact that it feels very inherently fair, but there's ways to craft these game states. There's evasion built in. There's this whole thing about like, oh, it's random. There's so much RNG. There's not. Brute has very little RNG in the class thing. Yes, there's the draw discard aspect. There's the discard a random card aspect, but random doesn't always mean random. You can set those up. It's the same way in Wizard, like you say, that banishing off the top isn't random banish. A lot of the time, you're not going to the casino, as you say, and just banishing cards off the top. So it's all about I think it's quite a tenet of like Flesh and Blood's designers is often looks like there's a lot of randomness in certain mechanics of the game, and that's actually not where the RNG comes in. It's in other spaces that kind of creep in, and after a lot of games you start to realize that, I think. But yeah, I love Brew. Sorry, one exception, KO. There you go. There's some actual RNG with KO's die roll.
KO's the truth.
I'm less of a fan of KO. I love Reiner. I love Livia. I think I'm warming up to Livia. KO on the other hand, a little bit less so. But yeah,
I agree with you on the Viscerai. I can't say it about the other Runeblade, but Viscerai was so before I learned Wizard, because I was one of those players too, and I grew, like you just can't be like that forever if you want to keep playing the game. You like eventually you gotta take your pilgrimage and learn Kano, right? Because eventually he's gonna be the best. Maybe, right? But if that day comes and you don't know how to play, you're gonna be miles behind everybody else. But before that, I was very much on the Viscerai train, and it's actually the way I became a little bit of a Haydendale fanboy. So I remember I was driving to Colorado. It was a long drive. It was like 12, 15 hours, and I was listening to the Session Blood stuff, and I was like, oh, Viscerai episode, Haydendale. And like honestly, that was like my favorite episode of the Session Blood podcast. I'm such a fan of like. Oh, it wasn't you, but like it's. I'm really a big fan of coming at the opponent with two different sources of damage. So you have the arcane, you have the physical, and it's just kind of making the game a bit tougher on their end. And yeah, it's just I don't know. Maybe I just like the heroes that are a bit different than the others. I also like the design of Ranger. Just currently not like a huge fan of the execution, but I like one of my favorite decks in Flesh and Blood is like 3 of a kind OTK Ranger. It just happens to be probably the hardest deck to play in the game. Like it's harder than OTK Kano, and it's much more fragile. But it's so cool. I mean, you have like 15 cards in hand. It's something ridiculous. But yeah, I actually really like the design of Ranger. I love the idea of traps. I love the arsenal. Flipping a dominate, a lot of deck stacking in that. But it just. Yeah, I mean, it's just a really, really hard class to play for, and not as much payoff as some other ones. Yeah, I mean, it's funny too because like I know we sometimes takes a little bit digs at Azalea, but I mean, it's by far like I do. Right, in my opinion, like Azalea and Wizard are pretty much equal on how complicated they are, and Azalea's like people don't appreciate how tough that character is to play.
Yeah, I mean, I spent 2 months playing that nonstop in Classic Constructed, and actually had a good time. Like I really enjoyed it. It was tough, and I felt almost always the underdog in my matchups, but it was fun. I want to say just on that, Arcane Rising is probably the best set from a design space so far, in my opinion, of the heroes we have. I like all of those heroes, and
flip the game on its head. Yeah, it's funny too because I was about to say Mechanol, like from a aesthetic kind of, and like also game design, but Mechanologist is like kind of my favorite. I really wanted, like when they spoiled that here, I really wanted something where you could have like persistent things on the board, because in Welcome to Wraith, like that wasn't really a thing. Like you had like potions and stuff like this, but it's not the same as like starting with an item, searching for an item of like Spark of Genius, like putting it on the field. Like I wanted to play a class where you could assemble like like a board state that would persist through the game and gain you incremental advantage as you kept assembling these permanents on the field. So Mechanologist is definitely. I'm really, if they have another Mechanologist, I think it could be awesome. I really like Dash. I mean, I liked Dash mid-range control.
Yeah. Well, I played a lot of Dash. And so the Dash is the first deck I built up when Arcane Rising came out, and finally ended up looking a lot like what mid-range decks ended up being. But then I was like, no, I really want to play like a heavy boost version when the shotgun came out, the Pleasant Barrel Shot. That was super interesting to me. Played a lot of that deck in Constructed and Blitz, but just wasn't the right time for it and wasn't the build to be playing then. So anyway, Mechanologist, hope to see one in the future. I really like it as well. I like the aesthetic of it as well. All right, Brendan, I think it's time to wrap up. I just want to say before we close it out that we already discussed formats at the start of this video. If people do have some suggestions or things that they would love to play in or see played and covered, then let us know from that perspective. Brendan, do you want to plug any socials real quick?
Yeah. Just want to plug and also give people an update. Hayden is unfortunately on lockdown, as we know, so he hasn't been able to get that hair dyed, but we did hit 500 subscribers, which is awesome. Our YouTube channel has been absolutely exploding. Obviously, Time on the Round, what you're watching right now, is a YouTube exclusive. We're uploading tons of more, very, very kind of in-depth, detailed deck guides and deck techs, as well as gameplay. Like we talked about, you'll probably see the Prism versus Bravo gameplay that came up a little bit before this. So yeah, if you're enjoying our content, if you're enjoying Time on the Round, and you're interested in those deck techs and gameplay, go ahead and shoot us a subscription. It really helps out. And yeah, we're really enjoying growing the channel. But Hayden will be a blonde man soon. I can assure you, he is working on it. The lockdown has slowed us down, but we will get there. So really happy about that 500. Anyway, active player turn 0, 1 additional turn.
That's Time on the Round.